Hey guys, what's up? Today is my 40th birthday. 40th birthday. And what do you do on your 40th birthday? Boat work. Today on Everything You Need to Know, we're doing some fiberglass repair. Alright guys, before we get started, I want to talk to you guys about resin because there's kind of two different schools of thought, if you will. We've got this guy, which is a polyester resin, and then you have your West System and things like that that are an epoxy resin. Most boats were laid up with the cheap stuff, polyester resin. This boat was completely made out of polyester resin, and probably 99% of boats were. Now, if you want to do the new way, the stronger way, the better way, you would use epoxy. And epoxy is just a new age sort of a resin that's a lot better, a lot stronger, a lot more resistant to every possible source of wear. Or you can use what they used when they built it. The difference is polyester resin is way cheaper. If you look at like a gallon of this is like 50 bucks. For a gallon of West System, you're probably in the $200 market with the hardener and all that stuff. So for my structural repairs, I use West System epoxy. The holes under the boat, things like that that you're patching, definitely West System. For minor stuff that doesn't need to be structural, I'm going with the cheap stuff to kind of save a buck. One more note on the two different resins. You can put epoxy on your polyester boat, but you cannot put polyester on an epoxy sort of a setup. So if you do a patch with epoxy and fiberglass and it's all really nice, and then you want to touch it up after, you have to stick with epoxy because you cannot go on polyester, putting it on top of epoxy, it just won't stick. So if you use epoxy, stick with epoxy. If you use polyester, it doesn't matter, you can use epoxy on top of it later. Okay, so the second thing, now that we know what the different resins are, we're going to talk about fiberglass mat. Now, this is actual fiberglass cloth. It's woven in two different directions, tensile strength in both directions. It's very good for structural sort of setups. You want definitely to be using this if you're patching a hole in the bottom of your boat. Then the other thing that you have is this stuff, chopped strand mat, and this is the stuff that is a mess, you can see. There's no tensile strength in any direction. You can rip this apart by hand, no matter which way you pull. So what this is really a filler. This is if you have to build something up and then be able to sand it easily. This is very good at that. So what we're going to be using today is this stuff, because I'll show you what we're actually patching. We don't need to use anything structural like this. All I want to do is build up a low spot with this stuff so that I can sand it later and make it perfect so that you can't tell it was ever a low spot. Okay, let me show you what we're fixing today. There are these spots right here, and Lady K's got about, I don't know, 10 of these where something obviously impacted right there, took a chunk out of the fiberglass, and you can see the glass inside under the gel coat, under all the finish. There's actual, you can see chopped strand mat right there. So that's what they used when they laid that up. That's what we're going to be using to fix it. There's another one right here, and it's sort of peeling apart, and that's where your knee goes when you're cranking on the winch. So definitely a wear spot there. There's a screw hole right here. We're going to take care of that as well. That's why we're choosing to use chopped strand mat, because all we're doing, it's not structural. We're just rebuilding the surface of the boat back up to where we want it so that we can sand it and finish it. And speaking of sanding, let's get started. All we want to do is grind it down to the lowest point in the middle and sort of beveled out around the edges so that when we start to build it back up, we can build it back to a nice flat surface. Alright guys, this isn't rocket science. We're going to be using DeWalt Orbital with 80 grit on it. You can use a little mouse sander. You can sand it by hand if you really want to, but we're going to bang it out real quick with this guy. All right, now, a couple things you guys might be thinking. Tim, didn't you just make a small problem a very big problem? And wait till it's done. You'll see. Once you actually build it back up, sand it back into shape, it's better than like it was new. The other thing is that I could be using filler for this. And yeah, I could definitely use like a thickened resin. And I have thickening for the resin, and I could do that, but then it's just sort of like Bondo, and I don't feel like it's going to actually bond with the original fiberglass surface and sort of get into all the nooks and crannies and stay there forever. I think using chop strand mat will actually last a lot longer. And lastly, you might be thinking, but Tim, you're going to have all these spots on your boat when they're a bunch up there that are finished, and then of course the glazing putty is red on its finish, that are going to be different colors, and it's going to be all spotty and blotchy. And yeah, that's kind of the point. This year I committed to doing every single imperfection in the top side of this boat. And if you commit to that, as soon as you do that, it's a very powerful thing, because then you're not worried about the paint anymore. Then you have to paint no matter what you do next. You are going to have to paint the entire top side, but this boat does need the entire top side painted. So as soon as I committed to that paint job, which will be at the end of this year, I would think, now I'm free to go ahead and do this kind of stuff and end up with different color and different patches. And yeah, the boat will be dog ugly for the remainder of the season, but when I paint it, it'll be perfect. And I'm going to get every screw hole, every imperfection. I'm sure I'll miss something, but it'll be a lot better boat when I'm done. Okay guys, our next step is going to be to get some fiberglass ready. So what I'm going to do is rip it by hand. I don't want to cut it with scissors because I don't want hard edges. Hard edges are easier or harder to sand out. So I'm just going to take little pieces and I'm going to match them up to the size that I need to actually fill. So I know that's going to be about right. A couple of smaller ones. Get them all ready ahead of time, because they're a lot harder to do when you get resin on your fingers and things like that. So we're going to grab a couple of these. They're all going to blow away. So we'll be able to fit these in right where we want them. And we'll probably do 3 or 4 layers on this one just to build back up. And then for this one, we're going to rip some longer pieces so that we can build it all back up. Okay guys, I got a good pile next to me of little ripped up pieces of chop strand mat we're going to use for our filler. Don't worry if the tails and things hang off the edges. When you sand it later, they come right off, so it doesn't really matter. Now we have to mix up some resin. So I like to use disposable drinks cups. Cheap, easy, and you don't have to buy those expensive ones that have like the measurements on them. And what this stuff calls for is, I believe it's, I think it's 10 drops per ounce of the actual resin. So 10 drops of hardener. Being as how it's hot today, I think we're going to do about 8 drops of hardener to 1 ounce of resin. That way it doesn't kick off too quickly and set up too quickly. If it's a cooler day, you might want to do the whole 10 drops. If you wanted to set up really quick, you could do 11 or 12 drops. It's not like epoxy. West System or some other epoxy needs to be mixed specifically to exactly what the manufacturer says. Polyester resin is a lot more forgiving in that manner. So let's get started with our disposable ounce, disposable cup. We have our stir stick ready. We have our brush ready to apply it to the actual area and set in the fiberglass. And I'm going to throw some gloves on because I promise I will make a mess. Also, hence the garbage bag on my table. I will make a mess. Let's go. right, guys, my last tip, it's starting to kick right now. It's starting to set up. It's been about 5 minutes. Is to just set this aside where you can keep an eye on it, because when this starts to set up and the brush won't come out anymore, you know that your repairs are starting to set up. So that's actually helpful. Just a reminder, Lady K Sailing is brought to you by patrons, people who give a couple of bucks an episode to make this whole channel possible. Hopefully you guys learned something from this. I'm going to continue the rest of my birthday here around the boat, just patching up different things and sanding out different things, and hopefully that build-up stays pretty strong, and then we should be back pretty soon to sand it. So I'll see you guys in a little bit. Hey guys, what's up? It's been about 45 minutes since I laid up the first couple patches. They're right here, and that one's still a little tacky. This one seems to be fairly good, and the cup with the brush in it completely set up. So I think 8 drops was the answer for 1 ounce. However, I don't have any more time at the boat today. I have to run home and get ready, because being my birthday, Boo is taking me out for dinner. And there's a race tonight here at the yacht club. I guess I haven't shown you guys around yet. So that's around. Anyway, we're gonna come back here to this town where the yacht club is. We're gonna go out for dinner at the restaurant here that's just reopened under new management, which is wonderful. And then we're gonna go for a race. So it should be a great time. That's it for this episode, guys. And I will see you next week. Take care.